Okay, so one thing I did say is I will be torquing the suspension at ride height. And the question is, well, how are you going to torque the suspension at ride height if the wheel's installed? It would be really hard to get a suspension components. Yes, I understand that. So what I'll actually be doing is putting the wheels back on, dropping the car from the hoist, measuring the distance between the fender and the top of the tire. Then I'm going to lift the vehicle up on a hoist. I'm going to use the jack to compress the suspension off of the lower control arm to meet that measurement I took between the fender and the wheel when the vehicle was on the ground. Then I can take the wheel off and access all the suspension and torque everything to the correct torque setting at ride height. That's how you do it. And just like that, the strut is installed with the upper control arm. No, yeah, just kidding. Basically learn this side and I'll walk you through the other side. All right, time for the fronts. First thing to do is take off the wheel speed sensor harness here. Okay. Looks like we have another connection deep in there. These things are a little tight. Yeah, definitely don't rip your harness out. Taking these out, the clips are going to be a lot cheaper than a new ABS sensor with harness. This is one part. Probably just fast forward through this part. All right. Now take off the bolt holding the upper control arm to the spindle. That's a 15mm nut and a T55 Torx for the bolt. To get this out, just squeeze the control arm a little bit. The bolt will slide right out and the control arm will come right up. Now note that you have a ton of play in the suspension with this disconnected, and you want to be really careful in this whole process. You don't want to pop the drive shaft out of the drive unit, so definitely don't just yank on this, because this is bolted to the hub and it will pop that out of the drive shaft, or worst case you can pop the tripod down in there out, and then yeah, you, like, very worst case, you would need to like take the boot off and realign the tripod, or if this CV joint came out, you'd have to take the boot off and realign it. So just note, like, here things are movable, things are free, just be careful not to pop the axle out. Now you can take the bolts, 21 bolts and nuts off of the strut where it meets the lower control arm. just like that. You freed the bottom. Now you're going to want to take the center apron off in the front here, and you're going to want to take out this 13 millimeter, this 15 millimeter, this 13 millimeter, and this 15 millimeter, as that's part of the front upper control arm mount here. And we'll take, once we loosen that, you'll see that this whole entire upper control arm and strut will come out as one assembly. All right, now I've bolted the front upper control arm mount, and the entire shock has come out and dropped down. So I'm just gonna open this up a little bit, push back on the bottom of the strut. Now clear this fender liner. I'm gonna try to escape the part down and out, just like this. Now the entire strut assembly is out. I'm just going to pop off only the front upper control arm mount. Front upper control arm separated. Attach them out. Now, we're going to have to compress this spring to take this bolt off so we can retain this upper strut mount. Okay, now we will prepare the strut, coilover strut, to accept the new spring. First thing I want to do here is actually just the height. I doubt this is the very highest point of the suspension. So I'm going to loosen the height adjustment portion of the strut, which is the bottom portion. Now I'm going to unscrew the actual shock in the strut completely from the base, and I don't really have a reference for height, so I'm just going to use the same height I used on the driver's side. We're now working on the passenger side, and then just kind of go from there. So the height I went with was, and this was already trial and error, height I went with was just 35 rotations, full rotations of the shock into the strut, into the strut housing. Okay. Yeah, as you can see, a lot of threads in there. So essentially what I did here is I just spun this in 35 times, full rotations all the way around, 35 times. I'm just matching what I did the other side. I actually don't know what that's going to do for as far as the height goes. I'm not actually going to touch up here. This preload is already set as per the website. This is set by Unplugged from the factory. Me actually adjusting this height here is not going to change the height in the vehicle, as that's just changing the preload of the strut, or where the strut's going to dampen within its load here, or its range. I'm not going to touch that. I'm only going for height here, so I'll just spin this in 35 times. And don't worry, I'll fast forward this part. Okay, as you can see, this is where it was when I got the shock. Just loosened a little bit, and this is the height I'm going with. As I say, I came to this height from trial and error. I first had this inserted only 20 turns in, and there was no way. It was just way too tall for the suspension. I was not able to make this bolt here into the lower control arm. It looked like the axle was going to rub on the subframe. So this kit does offer you more height than is actually possible with the suspension of the car, the geometry, without actually making modifications. So I kept reducing that height and then reinstalling, and I found 35 turns in here to be kind of the highest you can go, where things looked okay, like they weren't going to rub. So that's what that is. Yeah. Okay, now that I have the spring installed onto the strut, I need to install the upper strut mount here. So yes, my setup here is upside down. This is my spring compressor. I got a little lazy and didn't switch the arms, so everything is upside down now, but that's okay with me. I don't really care. Sorry for the attitude. All right, so gonna put the now 14mm nut onto the shock, and I'm just gonna use my impact here to spin it on. Actually, we'll tighten it a little bit. Tighten it a little bit too. Okay, so the difficult part here is because this is so deep, ideally you'd want an even deeper socket. This will work, but it's kicking you out towards the end of the travel. Ideally you want like an even deeper 14 thin wall socket. I don't have that, but I'll just torque this. I don't have a torque spec, so probably just gonna do 50 Newton meters, and then take it out and put the upper mount on. Now I'm going to remove the front upper control arm from the mount for the front. Okay, so now I just have a bare mount, and I will install the unplugged upper control arm. This the right. Yeah. That's better. But that was the same way, but for some reason wants to fit more easily there. Alright, giving a little trouble with the fit there. Just barely. The other side just went on perfectly, so I don't know what the deal is there. But just gonna snugly leave them loose because this will be torqued at ride height. So now leave the bottom a little loose on the strut, so I have a little play there to adjust it. Then I'm going to put the strut back into the mount. Just like that, and I'm going to look up the torque specs for these bolts, then torque them, and throw this back in. Alright, so now we're going to go in the same way we came out. Just like that, and again, try not to pull this too much because the axle will pop out there. All right, I did not get that on camera, but as you can see, this is pretty tight. Like, if I were to try to go to taller with the adjustment here, I definitely wouldn't be able to make this fast enough. Yeah, so just enough. Next, I'll tighten the front upper control arm bolts to the frame. Here you can see the dampening adjuster is easily accessed right here, as the top of that strut is nice and high. Now I'll connect the upper control arm to the spindle. Not gonna slide right in there, so I'll probably use a punch to open it up just a little bit right here, give it some more room. Then it should slide right in. I did find myself in a bit of trouble there trying to get the upper control arm in, which is odd because it went in pretty smoothly on the opposite side. And the struts are at the same height. So what I did is I just brought my jack over here and put a little lift on the suspension itself that straightened out the control arm to more of what you'd get with the vehicle at ride height, and then I was able to slide in real easy. So, all right, as I went to go bolt on the sway bar, I noticed that there's not really any way it's going to line up with the mount on this side on the strut. And then I looked at the other side and realized that I do have the bottoms of the shocks swapped wrong for each side. So unfortunately, I will have to take this all apart and swap each side. So something to keep an eye out for. Don't make the same mistake. All right, fast forward basically like an hour. I got the strut in the front swapped over for the other side, so this is the correct side. And that's pretty much all the install. I will have to zip tie the ABS sensor harness, which you can see, the wheel speed sensor harness, which you can see there are actually provisions where a zip tie can sit in, which is really, really nice. And this super high quality control arm. Besides that, I'm going to tighten everything up and then she's good to go. Oh, I should note that I have adjusted the dampening to match the rear. And that's just completely half. From soft to hard, I just went completely in half. You can actually access the dampening adjusters without taking parts off, besides just the wheels in the rear and the front apron up front. So if I want to go softer or harder with the dampening, I'll just do that. Besides that, we're almost done, and I'll get a video of what it looks like with the new ride height. Ready for the alignment.